Waco.
I say this every time. We're fortunate to get Chuck Cooperstein to join us on the show. He's as knowledgeable about anything sports as anyone I've ever known, and he joins us and especially loves college football, Florida Gator. And Paul still allows me to get him on the show as an FSU guy. Chuck, thanks for your time with Paul, Catalina, Craig, and David Smoak. I saw your Facebook post, and I'm not a big Facebook guy, but I did see your post comparing Friday to the NCAA Supreme Court ruling about television and also the death penalty. When you watched Friday unfold, what were you thinking? And thanks for your time for being a part of the show.
Well, listen, first, let's give Paul his due. You know, Florida State finally beat Florida. It took them a while to do it, and it took Florida in an emaciated state with a quarterback who couldn't complete 15 passes in a row, and they only won by 7 points, and gave up 38 points in the process.
Mm-hmm. It was a rough day for me. Yeah.
But have your moment, Paul. Yeah. It's okay.
Wow.
It's okay.
I love it.
But it was stunning. I mean, it was just really indescribable. I mean, again, that feeling that I had when I was in the room in Dallas on the morning of February 25th, 1987. I mean, at least there, like the initial shock was, okay, they're done for a year. And then you're going through the document again, and you realize for the second year, the NCAA had only approved 7 home games. Well, there's no way they were going to do that. So they were really shut down for 2 years. I mean, here, it seemed that's just one school. This is the vaporization of something that has existed for over 100 years. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that the Pac-12 leadership was so inept that they allowed themselves to get to this position. And it's their own damn fault. Now, look, people can go and look, well, the SEC took Oklahoma and Texas, and that started, this latest round. Or, you can go back to, 2010 when Nebraska ultimately decided to leave for the Big Ten, and whatever benchmark you want to use. I mean, none of it, none of anything that preceded last Friday involved an institution like the Pac-12 ultimately going away. We've seen conferences go away. Obviously, the Southwest Conference went away after 81 years, but that was that was like the patient that had inoperable cancer. You knew ultimately that was going to come. Here, I mean, this is basically like a hurricane coming in and just blowing everything to the ground.
Chuck, if you were Stanford and Cal, what would you do?
Boy, what a great question. If I were Stanford and Cal and I really wanted, do I want to commit to playing big time football? If I want to commit to playing big time football, then I would go to the ACC. But if I'm not going to be committed to doing it, and I don't know that Stanford is so much the issue here, but Cal clearly is and has been for years. Maybe you're better. Maybe you are better off dropping down to Group of 5. Maybe that better suits what your institutions ultimately are all about. And does that affect their Olympic sports? I guess, because all of a sudden you're only getting about $8 million a year as opposed to the $20 million that they had in the previous deal, or what they might have had under any other deal. But I mean, something at this point is better than nothing. But it does come down to football, and just how committed are you to the process? Stanford, they've had more success lately, but Stanford doesn't want to take in transfers. They don't want to deal with that. They don't want to deal with NIL. They don't want to deal with that. Well, if you're not going to deal with that, that's not the real world of college football in 2023. And if you're not going to be willing to deal with that, then you're probably better off dropping down.
Chuck, SMU is so willing to deal with all of that they're offering, according to various reports, to not even take really any money for several years to become a member of the ACC. which seems like it would only be possible given what we know now if, Cal and Stanford were to go through. Can you just kind of describe folks who don't know all about just SMU, just sort of, I guess their passion, also the drawbacks of they're not very big. They don't have great attendance, but the argument is, well, hey, you put us against Florida State, you put us against Clemson, we'll spend big money, we'll spend huge gobs and show up in droves. Just what are your thoughts on the Ponies seeing maybe that last life raft and doing whatever they can to jump on it, and how successful do you think they could be with an invite like that?
Well, again, as opposed to Stanford, SMU is committed. Now, it obviously took them a long time to overcome the death penalty to make themselves football relevant again. But don't you find some sense of irony in the fact that money on top of money ultimately shut SMU down in 1987? And now money on top of money, so much money that said, you know what? We don't even need money. We don't even need money. We'll just do what we do. It could very well be what ultimately gets them back to where they were prior to 1987. But you know what? I could see SMU doing a lot of what TCU did, and TCU bounced around. TCU went to 4 different leagues before finally getting into the Big 12, and obviously they've succeeded. And I could see the same thing with SMU. There's too much talent in the state of Texas for SMU and TCU, and for that matter, UTSA, to be able to get talent that can compete. It might take a while to ultimately build up the program. It took TCU a little while after they dominated the Mountain West and came to the Big 12 to sort of recruit at the Power 5 level. And it might take a little bit for Rhett Lashley to do that, or whoever the coach is going to be at SMU to do that. But I don't see why they couldn't succeed. And it does mean everything to them because, look, for a long time, I always believed that SMU should have concentrated on basketball. Once the death penalty came and just absolutely ripped them, they should have concentrated on basketball, kind of be like the Duke of the Southwest, if you will, because it's a lot easier to succeed in basketball than it is in football. But again, SMU has alumni and super long-term alumni that, always believe that Kyle Rote, Eric Dickerson, Doak Walker, and Craig James were all going to run through that door. And they were never going to give up the dream of playing big-time college football. And they're going to continue to do that until they are told they cannot play big-time college football.
There's no doubt that Clemson, Florida State, Miami's trying to get back, North Carolina with Mac right now, among others, are really, really good. It's not as if they're not afraid to play SMU. But would they be leery? I kind of get that impression they would be leery of including SMU. And I'm not sure it's because they might start recruiting even better, but I get the impression none of those teams want SMU in the ACC. Is it almost as if, why are we looking at them in the first place?
I mean, I don't know that it is a competitive issue.
No, I don't think it is,
the issue is, again, does SMU bring Texas to the ACC? I mean, it might from a recruiting standpoint. I mean, but we've already seen Florida State and Clemson, for years come into Texas and cherry pick players, right? We've seen that. Miami certainly has done that as well. But if all of this is about television, which I think it is, then, is SMU going to move the needle? Are people in Dallas and Fort Worth and Austin and Houston and, San Antonio, are they going to watch ACC football because SMU is in the ACC as opposed to watching the Longhorns and the Aggies and Texas Tech and Baylor and the people they've always become accustomed to watching, the people who have moved the needle in college football in the state of Texas for the last 30 years or longer?
Chuck, the overall college football plan seems to be, let's just react to when these things happen. What do you think, or when do you think that they will, as leaders, step back and go, okay, where do we want this to go? Because right now, they're just a car speeding down the highway, taking exits as they need to pee. That seems like the only thing they're doing, because I don't know what the plan is for what this looks like a decade from now.
What does Sark say? All gas, no brakes, right? I mean, kind of what this thing is right now. It's hurtling out of control. Somebody's got to grab control of it. The NCAA obviously is not in a position to do that. I think the college football playoff, the structure is in place to have them be the ones to control that and have a college football commissioner, if you will, whoever the head of the college football playoff is, who's going to succeed, Bill Hancock, be that person. I mean, there's got to be some type of centralization that goes on here. Because right now, I mean, this is like the Balkans. Man, this is Yugoslavia in 1991. I mean, I realize there's consolidation on some level with the growing of the leagues, but at the same time, it just seems like, again, everybody is out for their own interest. Nobody has the common good of college football involved, but I mean, I say all this, and then again, understand that this is as much a TV issue as it is a philosophical issue among the conferences and how they want football to represent their particular universities and conferences. I mean, Fox and ESPN are as responsible for all of this as any of the conferences are themselves. So, I wish I knew 10 years from now what this thing looks like. I mean, I do think ultimately, at some point, I may not be alive to see it, but I do think there's going to be a further consolidation. I could see an English Premier League style college football where, again, if TV is going to control everything, that they're going to say, you know what, here are the top 32 teams. And you know what, we're going to pay for the top 32 teams to play against each other. And I can see that happening because we're starting to see it anyway. I mean, it's taken really since 1984, right? Since the Supreme Court case to get us to where we are now. But I could certainly see that coming down the road to where, again, the English Premier League broke off in the early 90s and started. And I could see something like that happen here with college football, where again, it's if not the best of the best, certainly the most marketable of the universities that will allow the most money to come back to those universities. And then, we'll just have another stratification of football, and people might not like it, but I think at the very top, they'll love it.
Chuck, the Pac-12 obviously is on fumes with the 4 teams left, whatever may happen. The Big 12 has been not there, but very close to wobbling many times. Nebraska, Colorado, Missouri, A&M, Texas and Oklahoma, and even before that, Texas, Oklahoma, and others in the Pac-12. How remarkable in a lot of ways is it that where they are today, even though they cannot just take, we're good, they have to stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, I mean, look, 2 years ago, I don't think you and I would have had this conversation and looking at Big 12 stability as a hallmark of the conference right now, or Big 12 creativity as a hallmark of the conference. But I mean, full marks to Brett Yormark, and frankly to the Big 12 presidents for going out of the box and making a hire that on a guy they obviously knew nothing about, and a guy who had no background, certainly in college sports, but he knew how to promote. And that's the thing, I think, where the Pac-12 failed miserably. They went out of the box. They hired a guy from MGM events in Las Vegas to be their commissioner. But he did not have the go-getter attitude. He took, as Brett Yormark took nothing for granted. He said, hey, man, we got to go. We got to do this, and we got to do it now. And George Kliavkoff is a guy who basically said, nah, man, we're good. We're good. We don't have to take the ESPN Fox bid right now when they had their 90-day window. We're going to come back, and we're going to be a $40 million per school entity. And we're going to kill it. And he just completely misread the market and basically ran it into the ground. And again, their presidents didn't help very much in that regard, didn't push them very hard. And they wound up paying a terrible price for it. But I mean, the fact that the Big 12 was able to hang in there when it looked like it was going to be bad. David, I think your point, even more so than now, but back in 2010, when it looked like Larry Scott was going to be the big man on campus and complete the Pac-16 and take 6 from the Big 12 and basically end things here, and that it didn't go through, is among the most remarkable aspects of the last 15 years of college athletics from an off the field standpoint, that they are still standing, and frankly, I mean, they're a solid number 3 right now.
I saw some. Have you watched the Johnny Manziel Netflix documentary?
I did.
All right.
I did. I watched it yesterday.
With what was in there, and none of that surprised me at all, and we probably, pretty much knew most of that, but it was great, kind of interesting to watch it. With that being said, I saw where, I forgot who it was, put out a tweet, can we give Reggie Bush the Heisman Trophy back because of the documentary with Johnny Manziel? Does that put that back on the table? They won't, I'm sure, but is that something that at least is interesting to think about?
I've never understood why they took the Heisman away from him.
Okay.
I never did.
Me either.
Reggie Bush in the first place. He should have it. So yes, if you want to revisit it, go ahead and revisit. Look, it's like in college basketball, Louisville won the 2013 NCAA championship. There's no banner in the KFC Yum Center in Louisville recognizing that fact. But you saw that game, and I saw that game, and we know what happened that night. Okay, so it's semantics in many ways. Yeah, I'm sure Reggie would love to have the actual trophy on his mantle and whatever. And if it means opening it up, then I'm all for it, because again, we all know what happened. We all know what happened in these games, and the fact that Reggie, at that time violated NCAA rules, and USC got caught. But on the other side, does it really matter? I mean, again, Johnny played the games. He was great. He was absolutely phenomenal. He deserved to win the Heisman that year, and let him have his Heisman.
Yeah, the redacted wins and all that stuff has always, to me, been very silly. Awards, honors, and everything. Chuck, all right, so you have now August 4th. We have the death penalty in August, and also the NCAA Supreme Court ruling. In order now, is it Friday and then the NCAA Supreme Court loss and then the death penalty? What order would you put it in?
I think this is the biggest day. I think August 4th, because a 110-year pillar of college sports vanished, went away. We can talk about the Pac-4 being on life support. They're dead. Okay, there's not going to be an incarnation in 2024 of the Pac whatever, playing on the West Coast. Oregon State, Washington State are going to go someplace, and Stanford and Cal are going to go someplace, and that's going to be the end of it. SMU, as huge as it was one school. Was one school, and it was a monster story, and just had so much going on. But you know what? They'll do a 30 for 30 on this, just like they did a 30 for 30 on SMU. And then, as far as the Supreme Court ruling, it was certainly monumental at the time, because it did change how we all watch college football. But if anything, it enhanced college football. It made college football. It put college football in a position to be bigger than it was, and continually be able to grow, because you were always able to watch games. Mm-hmm. But for the shock value, of those three, I think Friday might have been the biggest.
Thank you, buddy.
No, in fact, not just might. It was the biggest.
Thanks for your time, Chuck. Great to have you on the show. Chuck Cooperstein does football for Westwood One. He's the voice of the Mavericks and has been involved in broadcasting for many, many years. You agree?